This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly.
Ethan.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is going to be the start of season 7.
I think it is. This is our first recording after the new year of 2026. So
That's right.
Generally speaking, that's when we change seasons.
You're still sticking with it.
Yeah.
You're still here. So I got an interesting question for you.
Uh-huh.
Do you think that it might be a two-parter. Do you think that we've covered in our podcast everything around school safety?
Is that a rhetorical question?
Could be.
It could be. So let me qualify that. I think we have done very well at covering the many different aspects of school safety and response and prevention. I think we've covered all of the phases. I think we've talked a lot about, not directly so much, but the difference between security and safety. Right? But as you have probably come to find out, this is a journey that will never end.
Wait, what?
School safety, let me put it in perspective.
I thought you were talking about my podcast. The podcast, me talking to you, was never going to end.
Well, the topics, the discussions covering everything. There will always be, we're dealing with humans and human behaviors, both on the good side and the bad side. I'm going to guess. I don't have any idea. We're in the 90+% of our content and our discussions are centered around acts of violence at school. Specifically, we talk more about active shooter than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, just as an industry as a whole, that's a topic that's always
there. Right?
Always there. Yep.
And there's many reasons for it, many of which I disagree. Some of them I agree with, but we talk about that. But we're also seeing more and more acts of violence that are not involving guns. When you're talking about human nature and human behaviors and human interactions, culturally speaking, and the status of society, if somebody wants to be violent against anybody, they can do it. They're going to find a way. Without getting too political, that is one of the reasons we can't. Gun control is a silly topic to talk about. Because if it's not this, then it's going to be something else. If you go way back to the early history of civilization and you look at the ancient martial arts, they didn't use one firearm. Firearms were, and gunpowder was in the future. Yeah. Warfare was, they found ways without firearms, right? So, they think that this is new stuff, but people have been battling for territory, for social status, for whatever, for as long as there have been 3 people on the earth.
Yeah, at least 4.
Yeah, maybe 4. Right? I'm not religious, so I don't know the whole story behind Cain and Abel, but somebody got beat with a stick.
Cain and Abel, yeah.
Cain and Abel.
That was with a rock.
The reason I said Cain and Abel is I actually had a sergeant his name was Cain Abel.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Rest his soul.
That's a very interesting name.
Yep.
All right. So, with that, so we kind of been dancing around innovation a little bit, and the future of education technology and education in the realm of school safety specifically. And there's a few mandates that are around that have been around for a while that I think we're kind of stuck on. And I think us as Crisis Go, we're trying to break that mold a little bit. Work with me here, Kelly.
Yeah, no, I know exactly where you're going, but I don't think Crisis Go has necessarily been stuck. I think
No, I wasn't saying that
Oh,
Crisis
okay.
Go is stuck. I'm saying that the K-12 industry as a whole, they're kind of stuck on some specific
Yeah.
mandates, right? We're looking at some mandates going, okay, this is like the highest tier of like, you know, the gold star of, this is if we have this, if we adhere to this mandate, then we're
We're
good. And
good. Yeah.
I think very soon Crisis Go is going to kind of
Bust
break
that.
that mold, right?
Yeah.
We're going to really show people what school safety can actually be.
Yeah. And just to
That's what I
expand on
meant.
that a little bit, the difference between the intent of mandates, what they're trying to accomplish, and
Mm,
how they actually manifested themselves and they're not the same thing.
right.
And
Yes.
I think the manifestation has hindered us and directed us down the wrong path.
Yeah, it's kind of done
Yeah, and
one of
we've
those
we've
things.
talked about it, and
Yeah.
they're they're focusing on simple versus effective,
Mm,
and I understand that, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah,
yeah. We'll slightly touch on. I know normally we don't get into product not really a lot, but I think starting out maybe it's okay for this one, I guess. So with that, my question for you, Kelly, let's talk about. I'm gonna hopefully pronounce this correctly. Interoperability.
interoperability.
Yeah. Try saying that 10 times fast.
Yeah, so
And what does it mean for you? Because obviously your prior law enforcement experience, like what does it
yeah,
mean in that realm?
so the the actual definition is having the ability for different agencies, different disciplines to come together for a common mission, common goal to address in this realm an emergency crisis together, to impact it as a single entity. And I say that with hesitation because it's not a single entity, but they have to come together and form a single entity and work together. And I think there's some misunderstanding about exactly how that works.
Mm,
And I think the people who think of it from its early days to what it really means and what it has always meant, it was just misinterpreted. I think you know, it's very difficult to move that ship once it starts going into a certain direction and move it back. And I think that's part of where we're at with these mandates is we started going down this path of mandates and a lot of these mandates were created by people, legislators, people with good meaning, good intent. And we started going down and these paths and they didn't really take a step back and look at it from, you know, a broader perspective. So, yeah, it really means having the ability to work together to communicate with each other and work towards a common goal and objective, right? So that's what it means.
all right.
Interoperability.
So let's talk about, currently when an emergency happens or any type of situation where you would do a lockdown alert. Talk me through typically how that looks when that alert is going to a PSAP from a school
So
normally.
let's first explain what a PSAP is, right? That's not a common term for people. It's a PSAP is a public safety access point. So it's government talk for your dispatch communications center, your emergency communication centers. There's many of them throughout the nation. They cover depending on where you're at, they might cover a single agency. They might cover a specific agency or a group of agencies. They might cover many different disciplines. So you might have a PSAP that does just fire, or they might be considered a secondary PSAP, but there's a lot of agencies that dispatch law enforcement, fire, medical, emergency medical services. So that's the PSAP. So when you have an emergency, the traditional way of summonsing help is 911. That 911 call goes to the communication, to the PSAP, the communication center. A call taker picks up your 911 call, and you'll hear it in some form very similar to this. 911, what's your location and what's your emergency? Right? So you explain where you're at and what your emergency is. Nowadays, some of that information gets automatically forwarded, but they want to confirm that the information they have is where you're actually at. So then they have to ascertain what your emergency is. And they're typing it into a computer-aided dispatch console, and then that goes to the dispatcher, the appropriate dispatcher. So if you call and your house is on fire, they would find out where you're at, what's going on, house is on fire. Okay, anybody inside? I don't know where my grandfather is, or I have pets inside, or nobody's inside. Then that goes to the fire dispatch console, right? And they pick it up and send the appropriate equipment and stations. If it's an armed robbery, that goes to the law enforcement or what have you, right? The idea and where we're at today, and we're just getting there, is that when you have an incident at a school, a lockdown situation at a school, that you press a button, an alert, a panic button, however you trigger and activate that alert. And then that gets escalated or pushed to the PSAP, either through a phone call, through your native dialer on your phone, somebody picks up the phone and calls, or if they have an app on the other side, the PSAP side, they can get that information the same time that your school gets it. You can configure your alerts to do that. The benefit to that is you've already pre-configured your alert to get the 2 points of information that you want across to them, right? So what's those 2 points of information? What is happening and what you want them to do. So the idea is that they get notified immediately, and they may not have all of the details, but they know something serious is happening. That allows them to send the appropriate equipment and resources to you quicker.
And so when, let's say I'm a school district and there's an event that requires like a district wide lockdown, are neighboring districts, how do the neighboring districts right now get notified that their neighboring district is on lockdown? Because of, it can be anything from forest fire, or there's a criminal on the loose and they don't know where he is, but he's in the area, something like that. Like,
yeah,
how does the first initiator of the alert, how does that alert get notified? Like, how does that get pushed to all the other neighboring districts?
Essentially, the current way is essentially not much more than a phone tree.
Right. That sounds like it takes time.
Somebody's got to call them. Somebody's got to think about calling them. Right.
And who knows if you're thinking about calling these other people when you're like actively trying to manage this.
Yeah, but I will tell you one of the biggest benefits of having an app or a pre-configurable alert system, management system, is you can pre-configure who needs to be notified. Right? So it becomes tricky when you're talking about different districts. right? Because they're two separate entities, all siloed. But one of the benefits of pre-configuring those to make notifications are almost every district that I've ever come in contact with. If something significant happens on a specific campus, district administration and leadership wants to know. So now you have a principal who's trying to deal with whatever they're trying to deal with, also worried about, oh, I got to talk to my assistant superintendent, or I got to call the board, or I got to call so and so. But if you pre-configured that alert correctly or sufficiently, it'll notify them. Once it gets that alert, it will say, this is happening at this location. And then they'll know. Principals don't have to worry about those notifications. Same with the escalation to law enforcement. If you're properly trained and your alerts are properly configured, you can press that button and all these different things happen at the same time with a single press of the button or a single activation. You tell what protective action that is needed: lockdown, secure, shelter, evacuate, whatever is needed. So you get that action moving. You notify all of those people who need to know, even if you don't think they need to know it. But by policy, they need to know it. School board members, superintendents, assistant superintendents, PSAPs, all of those people, they all get the same information that the people who are directly involved with the incident receive. The problem is the silos that we're in, and you have to have that out. So if you're not a user of the same system that we're using in the example, then you're not getting it. So then somebody has to make that call. Somebody has to, and that was when I brought Crisis Go to our district. I literally went around to every PSAP in our county and provided them with training and said, here's the deal. This is what you need to do. If you get this kind of alert, you need to look at your map. CAD will help you with this. And you need to know all of the schools that I call touch the impacted school, the schools that are in the very close vicinity of that school. And as a general rule in practice, not a absolute, but as a general rule, if you place somebody in like a secure, or I'm sorry, you place somebody in a lockdown, you would call all of the schools in the immediate vicinity of the impacted school in a circle, perimeter essentially, and put them all in a secure. Right? And the reason for doing that is until you get the incident stabilized, you don't know if whatever's happening gets outside of that perimeter. And a lot of these schools, many of them are on the same campus, right? Many of them are literally across the street from each other in their different districts. We had that situation quite a bit in my area. My school district was K through 12, but there were I don't remember the number, 3 or 4 other districts that were K through 6th grade, I think.
Okay.
And so they fed into our schools for the secondary education. So like my children went to elementary school in one district, and just down the street was a junior high in another district. And the high school was in that same district as the junior high middle school. So, but their education just fed into the other district, but they were very close in proximity. And, even the slow guys can move within a mile pretty quick.
Yeah.
Understanding that and how you communicate. So that was part of our initial training. I went through all the districts, all the PSAPs, and said, if you get this is what's going to happen, and this is what you need to do. So that's the way we did it. Let's take a step back and look at interoperability. And we've talked about this aspect of emergency preparedness and all of those 4 phases of emergency, the timelines and so forth, right? We are overwhelming still to this day working from a perspective of response and how we respond to something. That's part of the issues that we have with many of our mandates. Our mandates are centered around response.
Mm.
And when you look at the response, what does that actually entail? And if you've heard me talk about the incident timeline at all, you understand that prevention pretty much stops at the point in which that incident has been triggered. So we call that bang, right? Once the attack starts or once the incident starts, you can no longer prevent it from happening. So here's the secret to that is once we respond, we are not responding just to isolate the threat, to mop up what happened already. We are there trying to prevent further harm. What are our three objectives? Stop the killing,
Stop
stop
the
the
dying.
dying, start the recovery. Those are our three objectives, always. So if our first priority is stopping the dying, then we need to make sure that everyone understands who else could be impacted if we fail at our initial response. Other campuses is, so we have to look at these high value targets for the perpetrator, right? Is if we fail at containing the perpetrator here, where are they going?
Mm.
To another target, right? Most likely the closest, right? Then you can expand your notifications out from there. But we're talking about interoperability. It's how do we respond in a coordinated effort? And interoperability became a huge thing after Katrina.
Mm.
This is where we first went down the wrong, I say the wrong path, but it wasn't necessarily the wrong path. It was probably the first step down a wider path than we talked about. So when people, especially in my generation, talk about interoperability, the first thing they talk about, because this was the first indicator we had issues, was the inability to communicate. We were on different radio frequencies. Our equipment, our firing equipment, has a different diameter hose attachment. So it can only fit on the fire hydrants that were built for our trucks, right?
Okay.
But
Yeah.
you see the thing, right? There's interoperability means, can I actually go help somebody? Interagency. And we, especially in law enforcement and the fire departments, we were going to the same incidences on completely different frequencies.
And when you say frequencies, you're just talking about your radio frequencies.
Radios. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we weren't big into the technology back then, right? Technology was there, but we didn't have common frequencies. And so everyone jumped on the bandwagon. We need to get compatible frequencies. So that's when you started seeing programmable radios
Mm.
or multi-channel radios, where you could flip into another so that you could talk. The problem comes in, and we talked a little bit about this in our pre-production discussion, is when you have even a few people, and anyone who has any experience with radios understands what I'm about to say. Some people just have to hear themselves talk. And you could have 15 people, but one or two guys are always talking on the radio. And you're like, dudes, get off the radio, right?
Probable
And
cause.
right. So there's been in our agency, we've had some serious stuff happen, like officer involved shootings, where people were responding to the initial call, and the initial arriving deputies got into a firefight and were unable to call for help because people were talking on the radio covering and jamming
Man.
up the radio because they wanted to know what road they should drive down.
That's
Where do you
terrible.
need me? Where are we going? What's happening? Any updates? And so, and it doesn't take very long for people to realize, and this is how is interoperability is a good idea in concept. We don't put it into practice very well. And when we look at, and this is where we're headed, is it's not just about radio frequencies. We hear this to this day. In our early stages, not too long ago, we were introducing what we call Crisis Go Connect. It is essentially an interoperability platform, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we introduced it to some law enforcement people thinking they're going to say, well, this is fantastic. And many of them did. But some of them said, well, why would we need that? We'll just talk on the radio.
That's like one layer.
And so that's one layer. You're having to figure out everything from the beginning, from your beginning, right? And what I mean by that is as soon as you enter the incident, that's your beginning.
Right.
You have no history. You have no data of what's happened before. You don't know any status. And that's why it was so frustrating to me as an incident commander when you would be into a incident for even 10 minutes, which is a long time and when you're in these types of incidences. And somebody says, okay, where we're at. Dude, if we've been in this, so I need to know where we're at. All right.
You'd have to redo that like multiple times every time a new entity came in.
Yeah, and everyone
Let me
thinks they're
start
more
again.
important. Yeah, everyone thinks that they're more important
Man.
than what you are doing, right? So when you sit back and you go, well, wait a second, what happens if you miss that information and all you're using are radios? It's gone.
Yeah.
The only place that it is preserved is on a recorded line somewhere. Everyone records.
But you'd have to go back and listen to that.
You'd have to go back and listen
recording.
to it. You have to find it, right?
Okay.
Not really
Wow.
interoperability.
No.
You can ask a question and get your question answered, but you're not understanding the status of the event. You're not understanding the mission. You're not understanding the gaps that need to be filled. You don't know who's doing what, right? And I know I'm going to get some pushback with that. Not everyone needs to know everything, and that's 100% true. 100%
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. Definitely.
But true interoperability means that if I need the information, I can get it.
It can be provided to you.
It can be
quickly.
provided to, or I can get it.
Yeah.
Specifically, I can get it, right?
Yeah.
It's there. If it's not there, then I know I need to ask somebody for it if I need that information. And the ability to look at what has happened, historical documentation of something that happened 10 minutes ago. Somebody said this happened, or there was this information, scrolling back through and looking at it and saying, here it is. Here's what they said. Has this been handled? We can do that pretty quickly. But looking at data from your perspective is incredibly important. The same data has to be provided for the entire incident, but different disciplines are going to look at that same data differently. And if you're on the radio, and even if you're getting all of the radio traffic and you're understanding the radio traffic, you get it from the perspective of the person who's giving you the data, the radio information.
Mm.
And then you have to try to figure out what the context of that is and what it means to you, right? But if you are looking at data that has been interpreted and placed visually on a map, doesn't matter what agency you're from, you look at what's important to you, right? So you look at what is important to the overall operation and the mission, because we have the three objectives. And once we understand that we have those three objectives and that we're all working towards those objectives, we know how we impact those objectives. I know how law enforcement is impacted by those objectives. I know what I need to do. The fire department looks at those objectives and the information they have, and they know what they need to do. And all they have to communicate is, hey, I need to go here. I need to do this. How do I do that? They don't need to figure out where the casualty collection point is or where the injured are located throughout the building or where the triage place is, the staging area, because it's already been figured out for them. And it's planted on a map, and you know where you're at, and you can look at the map and you can say, here's triage, here is the casualty collection point, but here are several injured people who have been placed on the map by somebody who knows where they're at, and we can say they haven't moved yet, so we need to address those. We need to get them from where they're at to the casualty collection point, right? Perimeters, transportation, all of that stuff has to be looked at collectively. Interoperability really means I have access to information and data that helps me address my responsibility to complete the tasks that are required to me based upon my discipline and in furtherance of the overall mission and objectives. Why is that important to us today, Ethan?
I mean, you're moving through an incident much quicker than a normal. Not doing that, there's so much friction. There's so much time there, and like if everyone's on the same page, you're able to manage an incident a lot quicker and get to the people you need to get to a lot quicker.
Right. Yeah,
it's my first go at that.
Yeah. No. What we're talking about is in the next iteration, the next evolution of the next evolution of school safety is really into community safety, right? And the ability to have a central point where the data from an incident is collected and dispersed and shared with whomever needs it.
All on a single pane of glass, as you like to say.
I like to say there's people in crisis code who don't like that. They said it's overused, but it's what people understand. But having the ability to have a unified response, we talk about unified command, but we rarely talk about unified response. And when you're talking about interoperability, that's what we're talking about. Unified response is having all of these different entities come together as a single team. So go back, and if you've ever read the book Team of Teams by General Stanley McChrystal, it's bringing disparate people from different teams together to work towards a single objective, a single mission. It's having that team of teams. And right now, we have a team of law enforcement officers. We have a team of fire department personnel, emergency medical personnel, and hospitals. Those are our four primary players in these types of incidences. And right now, they're not seeing all of this information. They're told to go somewhere. You'll figure it out once you get there. We've talked about how long 2 minutes is, 3 minutes is to get somebody there. No. What if we had somebody there who's saying, this is what's happening on the way, so that your situational awareness is 2 minutes ahead of time, 3 minutes, right? So,
man, that could be the difference right there.
Right? So I've talked about this before. The initial response of emergency personnel, you get the 911 call, you get dispatched, whether you're fire department, law enforcement, medics, whatever. You get that 911 call and you get there, and now you have to do an initial assessment. You have to find out, because I will tell you that the 911 call is rarely the same as what it actually is on the other side when you respond. When you get there, it's something different. So you have to figure it out, right? But the more information you have, the better off you are. And that initial, I call that the chaos hour. That initial response is, what do I got? What's happening? What do I need to do? And what are my priorities? And so I'm trying to figure that out. Now, I've seen literally you get there and you're ready to go. You understand exactly what's happening because everything is so clear to you. And then I've seen that chaos hour last 2 or 3 days where people are they're just lost. They don't know. And I'm not exaggerating on those 3 days.
That's
I'm
crazy.
talking about incident commands that have sat there and said, we don't know what's happening here. Everything is changing so quickly, we can't keep up. Right. And rather than taking a step back and saying, okay, let's look at this, and anywhere in between, a couple of minutes to a couple of hours to days, and trying to figure out things that are going or should have already occurred that haven't occurred yet. Nobody's keeping track of things that have already been ticked off. The idea is, if you get the information that you need from your perspective, you can interpret that and you can see that going or being interpreted for you by PSAPs, right? Saying, hey, we're getting reports that the shots are being fired down the 100 hall. It's moved to the 200 hall and it's gone upstairs. They can get that information almost real time. And so having that ability to bring up that map, having that ability to have that information on the terminals in their cars, on their phones, that kind of stuff is game changer. I do want to point something out there. That doesn't mean they're going to be looking at the phone saying, oh, this is this. But if they need it and have time to look at it, they can find it.
Right.
Unlike listening to a radio. Once it's said, it's gone. You can't go back. If you missed it, and you say, what was that? You have to ask them to repeat it.
Yeah.
Right? If you miss the map, you look at it and go, that's where we're at. Okay. This is what's happening. This is our perimeter.
You need all those layers of visual, audio, anything and all those together are going to give you the best situational awareness picture.
Yeah. And, I'm going to use this analogy, visualization that has come up. And I think this really illustrates where we're at today. Recently, the analogy was the gaming industry and where we've come through back when I was a young kid. And I mean, I will tell you that my first video game was Pong.
Was that on?
I think it was Atari.
Was that on the big board, or is that on the Nintendo? And
no, I think it was Atari. I don't remember.
Atari. Okay, yeah.
It was the first one you connected to your TV.
Yes. Okay.
And you had little players. Now you could play by yourself, or you could play with an opponent. You had little paddles and had a little ball go back like a ping pong, right? Hence the name. So I go back a long ways, but I didn't play with games a lot after that.
Yeah.
But I understand the concept because I had kids that grew up in the rapidly changing evolution of games. The single player was really left to play against themselves, to figure out the game themselves. And then we started evolving to a point, without going through all of the steps, where we now have games that you can create teams on the fly. You can join teams on the fly. You're watching the same environment. And you're interacting with each other in that same environment. And you're looking at the same data from your perspective. You're a player within this environment. you have somebody who could be thousands of miles away, who is virtually standing next to you and seeing the same environment at the same time.
Pretty crazy.
Absolutely crazy. But if you translate that kind of concept to emergency response and management, you are now looking at the ability to look at the same environment from the perspective that you need to look at it from. So if your environment includes you going after some opponent in a building, but you set somebody else up as a perimeter security, they can look at it, they can back their backup to that building and be perimeter security while you chase down the bad guys, right? So that's kind of where we're talking about here, is we can look at the data that is being provided, and you can look at it and essentially be there without being there. And you could have your command staff, and I'll give you another quick analogy shortly, but you could have your incident management staff controlling what happens and placing the players on the map as to where they're supposed to go and where they're at. And I'm sure in some evolution we'll be able to track players real time.
Wouldn't be hard.
It wouldn't be hard.
No.
But the other analogy is we both know somebody who plays, I'm not sure that's the right terminology, but loves flight simulators.
Mm. Yep.
And I was talking to him about this and his wife, who we know much better than we know him. It is amazing what flight simulators can do. And I'm thinking flight simulators, okay, I'm going to fly a little Cessna, or I can fly a 747, right, on a flight simulator. But you have people in these flight simulator games that act as air traffic control.
Yeah.
Ground control.
It's pretty
transportation, airport operations. So every aspect of flying a plane, military, commercial, private, general aviation, experimental, you can do virtually in the basement of your house. And you're working off the same environment. And you're actually connecting environments because you may fly virtually from Minneapolis to New York LaGuardia, right? So now you're connecting people who are in charge of that airspace and that airport, right? So that's where we're looking at. That's what we're doing. We're not looking at it anymore. Is allowing us to bring everyone into the same environment at the same time with the same data at the status. Everyone's looking at what the current status is because we're adding the data as quickly as is allowable by technology, right? So what that means is if you press a panic button and it goes to the PSAP, this is what mandates are. Press the button and it has to connect with law enforcement to show who pressed the button, where they're at, and connect with law enforcement so they can respond to that location as quickly as possible. Right now, most of our competitors can only notify law enforcement or the PSAP and place that on a map for them.
Mm-hmm.
We can now place that on a map for anyone who has access to that, right? So as an incident commander, because I'm not a patrol, I don't have a patrol function, so I'm not in the building. But as soon as I get there, I say, contact team 1, where are you? We're here. What are you doing? We're in the middle of this. Likely telling me to shut up, right? But I don't even have to look at that because I get there, I pull up the map at my incident command post. I pull up the map and there's a big red dot where that panic button was initiated. And so now I can look at it and say, okay, here's Here's where we need to go. Boom, right? Now I've got my contact teams there. We understand where the bad actor came in from. So now we can look at a path and say, okay, where are our likely casualties? I can start setting up a perimeter. I can start asking for the resources that I need. I can determine where the staging area is. If I'm really advanced and I'm really thinking about the evolution of this event that's unfolding in front of me, I'm going to need a reunification. I can now add the map for the reunification site, activate my reunification team, get them going, and they can see where we're at and where they're at, right? And we can control that, right? So only the people who need to see that, but I can place my perimeters. I can look at once the threat has been isolated and the incident stabilized. Now I can see where my rooms, when I send my law enforcement personnel to start clearing and evacuating the buildings, I can see where they're doing that, right?
Yeah.
I can see the little pins that have been placed by the teachers saying, we're okay, or we need help, right?
That's so valuable.
I can see all of that as an incident commander, and I can prioritize very quickly just by the color of the pins that have been placed when they took roll. Yeah, we're good. Okay, I don't need to bother with you right now. Thank you. Hang on, we're coming for you. Or here's a red one because they have a couple of injured students or an injured teacher or somebody in that room, and we need to get to them quickly. Because what are our priorities? Stop the killing, stop the dying. And stop the dying means getting those patients who need medical attention, get them identified and get them transported as quickly as possible. Whose job is that? That's fire department in a medical emergency. But we have to coordinate that because this is still an active scene, right? So being able to communicate like that, it becomes so much more easy to manage.
Yeah.
It becomes so much easier. I mean, it's crazy. And the one thing that's not really a priority, but it sure reduces the frustration and anxiety. We talked about those people coming in when after the event has happened and because it's just done on radios, they're coming in and trying to get an update. Where are you at? What are you doing now? What's happening? And with this system, one, they don't have to come to the command post. They can pull it up at their desk and look at it and see it unfold. If they choose to come, because I don't know why, I get it, but it's just frustrating. Administrators that you haven't seen in years, all of a sudden, when something happens, they need to be in your face. So they need to be right next to you. But if they show up at the command post because they feel this need to be involved, which is a thing, all you have to do when they say, where are we at? Point to the TV screen with the map on it, and you say, we're here. This is the status.
Look over there.
Take a look at that. Let me handle this. I'll come back to you in a little bit if you have questions or if you see something that I missed, because that's possible. So we're all working off the same deal. Manually speaking, when we're looking at incidences, manually speaking, when we're talking about incidences, we do this with an incident action plan, and we get there and then we develop it for this operational period. And we don't have enough time to go through all of this, but it's kind of the same thing. It shows everyone what their jobs are, what their tasks are, what the objectives are, the expectation is in the next hour, 2 hours, what we're going to do. But when an incident is so dynamic as what we're talking about, all of that preparation and understanding has to be done beforehand. And then what you're seeing is almost the real-time creation of the incident action plan based upon the evaluation of what you've already done. Does that make sense? So stay tuned. This is going to be big for us, I think, big for safety. And I think this truly is the next evolution that will revolutionize how we address not only school safety, but community safety.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this.
I think it's going to be good.
Me too.
Look at that. We got a smile out of Kelly. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.